how did your like work-life balance shift versus when you were working for the firm and then when you had your own office?
Yeah. So, I mean, the good thing and the bad thing is that you can work as little or as much as you want when you have your own practice, right? So you can set it up any way that you want to. And what I learned later is that you can change to make things fit what you want your business model to look like. The traditional practice for most solos, right, is setting up a litigation practice. And especially coming from the firm, you think you've got to be there all day, all day and all night, right? And that's what most attorneys do. But a few years ago, I got burnt out and I decided there was a point where I got really burnt out and I thought, okay, let me figure out what I'm good at and what I like to do. And I really like to teach, which I'm sure we'll get into on my non-traditional career path, right? But I thought, okay, how can I teach about the law and have clients pay me? And so that sort of morphed into working for defense side or advising small businesses that had employees and doing trainings on how do you hire your first employee? What do you need to know about this new law that came down? And so I was still studying the law, but then I was teaching and hosting classes and workshops for people that was different from, of course, the traditional, litigation model. So it's nice because you can do anything that you want, but it's also a challenge because you can do anything that you want. So, until you're able to hire a team to work to make money in the background for you, you're doing all of the work, right? But you can decide to go home and have lunch with your kids, or cut off early and go to happy hour, but you can't do that same thing when you work at the law firm.
How hard was it to make that transition doing plaintiff stuff to basically almost being like a consultant for small businesses?
Yeah. So it was easy in terms of like the desire to want to do it, but I didn't. I'd always been told you shouldn't work on both sides of the fence at the same time, right? Like I shouldn't be representing plaintiffs and also be representing employers. And so I'd closed down all the litigation cases and then came back and said, okay, let me do defense. I won't even call it defense side because I didn't really want to litigate. I just wanted to be a consultant. But what I should have been doing is cultivating those cases while I was closing down the plaintiff side work. And so that transition for me for a year was really tough because I was now trying to get clients in a different arena. It was also challenging because a lot of small business owners don't understand why they should have you on retainer. Right. And then when you do the classes, like you got to get enough volume, to be able to get people in there to start making the money. So it was a transition, but I don't think it was a bad one. It was challenging, but I'm glad I did it.
When you say retainer can you explain that for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So retainer is most businesses, or if you're doing defense side work, your law firm's probably going to be on retainer, meaning that the client pays a certain amount of money per month and gets X number of hours from you or from the law firm. So my idea was to have, businesses on retainer be from $5,000 to $10,000 a month, for, I don't know, maybe 25 hours worth of work a month, something like, I don't remember what my exact numbers were, but to have that reoccurring revenue as a business owner, and then for me as a business owner, right, for the law firm, and then have the clients have access to me and trust that if something came up, they'd be able to get to me when they needed it. But the small folks who I really wanted to help didn't have enough money for all of that, right? And then to go medium size, I felt like I needed a bigger team to be able to do all the work that they needed to have done.
And so at some point, you started to teach junior college classes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd mentioned that time of getting burnt out. I got completely burnt out. And at the time, what did I do? I went back to business school, actually. I went and got my MBA. And I keep saying that you never could have told me in law school that I was going to go back to school, but I guess that's not entirely true because when I was in law school, I was looking up PhD programs for education because I was still really wanting to do this education thing and I wanted to do international education, and you can see an international theme there. And so I went back to business school and I was going to business school full time. and running the law practice. And because I was burnt out, I thought, let me see what's my skill set and what do I like to do. I taught adjunct for Cal State East Bay in their paralegal program before, and I applied to a couple of schools full time. And a friend of mine told me about an opportunity at American River College in Sacramento, and I thought, I don't want to do that. It's in Sacramento. Like, I'm in Oakland. I'm not doing all that, right? And she's like, I should just apply and see what happens. I was like, fine. So I applied, I don't know, sometime in the summer, I think, didn't hear anything back. And it was December. And they called me and said, hey, we want to do, an interview with you. This first one can be on Zoom. And I'm like, okay, fine. I got back after the new year, and then they called me back for a second interview, and I ended up getting the job, right, at this community college to run the paralegal program. So I was in the position where I still had my law practice full time, and I was in business school full time. And then now I have this full time teaching opportunity. And if you know anything about education and teaching opportunities, they don't come up very often, right? They're like coveted positions, and they're hard to get into because people don't leave them. So I thought, well, gosh, I can't pass up this opportunity, even though it's in Sacramento. And so I took it, closed down the law firm as quickly as I could, and really put it on pause. I knew I wanted to come back at some point, finished up business school, and was teaching full time at the same time in Sacramento. So that was my transition.
Approximately how many years in was this in terms of like your legal career?
So let's see. I started in 2017, January of 2017, and I passed the bar in 2009, I think. So 8 years in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that point, you knew that like what didn't you like most, or what was your least favorite part about the litigation process?
Yeah, for me, it was really, really draining. It was really draining. In the beginning, it's fun because everything new is fun, right? And then I ended up, in employment law, you're dealing with people's emotions, right? People are upset because they've lost their job, they've been discriminated against. And for me personally, I like to be a quick problem solver. I don't do well with the time that it actually takes to just resolve a case in litigation. Like, it doesn't, unless both parties are willing to settle right away, you're drawing these cases out for a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, right? And so that was just draining for me, and I couldn't resolve anything quickly. So, and then also being a solo, I've had different people working for me at different times, but I'm easy to get to, right? So I don't have a team of people, or didn't have a big team of people, that clients who were, really upset about the situation, not upset with me, but they could just get to me, right? I'm answering my own telephones, and people come by and knock on the door. So it was good while it lasted. I enjoyed it while it lasted until I didn't, right? And then I was like, I don't want anybody to ask me for another thing. And I knew that it was time to get out, because when you're not excited about it, you're going to start missing deadlines. You're going to be lazy on the paperwork, and that's all bad. You can't do that as an attorney. You got to be all in.
Right. I remember we shared an assistant.
Elisa.
Yeah, shout out to Lisa. And so I remember her telling me about your clients calling you on your cell phone. And I remember around the same time, I had like a cell phone rule. Where it was like, I think the rule was that if I didn't feel comfortable giving you my cell phone, I really didn't want to litigate your case.
Ooh, good one.
And so, because when your client's got your cell phone, I mean, if you got a needy client, that's the worst.
Right.
Because there's no separation. You're always working. There's no respect for your time anyway.
Right.
And so there's no boundary.
Right.
So that was like I was like, not every client got my cell phone,
Right. And I didn't give it to the clients intentionally, but it might be like, I'm out someplace and need to ask a quick question, right? So I'm going to call from the cell phone. It was like an accidental giving the cell phone number.
And then, at the time, like the technology, I mean, this wasn't that long ago, but the technology wasn't as robust as it is now. So like now you can kind of call from your cell phone via like an 8x8 app. But
that's what I had.
But back then, like, I don't even know if they had an app. They might have, but I wasn't using it.
I don't think they had an app back then. I wasn't using it. I think I'd started out with a Google Voice number, which is still, it still rings on your cell phone, right? So I did that in the beginning. It was like, okay, this will be, easy, because in the beginning, everything's exciting. Like, yeah, I'm starting this business. Oh, my client needs me. Like, oh, I'm great. I mean, you feel like you're in demand. And after like, I don't know, a few months, maybe a couple years, you're like, So, it's tough.
How did you integrate your travel? I know that you love to travel. How did you integrate your travel with the various careers, either the teaching or when you were running your own practice?
Yeah. So when you're running your own practice, you can decide when you want to take vacation, right? You just got to make sure that you're generating enough revenue to be able to fund the lifestyle that you want, right? And that's true whether or not you're traveling or staying put. So what was easy, what I was able to do is I was able to say, okay, the World Cup in Brazil is, June 2014. I'm blocking off the whole month of June and a week in July, to be able to take this trip, and I can block it off on my calendar. And when you know it in advance, you can work around it so you don't have any dates that come up, court dates or whatever that come up in that time frame. Whereas when you're working for somebody else, first of all, you only get 7 to 10 days maybe of vacation. And even then you got to make sure you have your billable hours in and all of that stuff. So I was really just able to build it in because I wanted to. And then as technology got better with the 8x8 app, like you were talking about, you can be someplace else and have your laptop and have your phone somehow and still be in contact. Now that's like good and bad, right? So if you don't mind working a couple hours a day from the beach in, Colombia, then like that's great. But if you really want a vacation, then you got to figure out how to set it up on the back end so that somebody else is handling everything that could possibly pop up so that you can go and actually be free.